Hello, I'm Eric Dermengen, and welcome to the Bay College Civics Corps third annual Civics Corps Experience podcast. The Civics Corps is a club at Bay College in Michigan's Upper Peninsula that focuses on civic engagement and intergenerational dialogue. Every winter semester, we work with Waging Dialogue to complete a micro-credential certification training in civic diplomacy skills. To do so, Civics Corps members partner with people from different generations to discuss topics over which we might have differences or disagreements. We call this partnership a conversational dyad. The dyad model allows us to practice and build job ready skills anchored in methods tied to neuroscientific and historic memory. Each winter semester, we produce a podcast that is a meta dialogue, or a reflective practice that explores our dyad discussions. We will discuss our conversations, how this work developed our skills, and what we learned through the experience. So, without further ado, let's get started with a quick introduction of my colleagues. We have Gabriel View, Alyssa O'Driscoll, and Lindsay Maloney. Facilitating our conversation tonight is our whaling is our waging dialogue mentors, Dr. Alice Mayer, Mr. Matt Bugatti, Ms. and Mrs. Samantha Birch, along with Civics Corps founder and advisor Dr. June Cleese, who will get us started with the first question.
All right. Thank you, Eric, for that warm introduction. And we're going to go ahead and get you guys talking. This, as Eric mentioned, is a meta dialogue. So you'll be reflecting on your experiences that occurred with your dyad partner. So let's sort of set the stage for everybody to get us rolling. Tell us a little bit about your partner, obviously, without getting into personal information, along with the topic or topics that your partner and you covered. And whoever wants to get us started with that, would just like to make sure that all four of you address a little bit about your partner and the topics you covered.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, June. I'll start off, I suppose. My partner was born in 1964, so we have a 42-year-old age gap between us, so it's quite different. He served in the U.S. Army before going into corporate management at UPS, and he's currently a business instructor at a local community college. And what we discussed was what is driving the shift in culture today that we've seen that's changed from the past.
Interesting topic.
My dyad partner is a librarian at the Bay College, and our topic of discussion was book banning and challenging, and how it affects students, librarians, libraries, and public schools.
My dyad partner is a sprinkler design professional. He's a Gen Xer and is from the South. We discussed differences in our upbringings and uh, cultural differences based on where we grew up.
My partner was a 70-some-year-old man who lives in the local area and is a retired forester and enjoys playing the French horn in his free time. Some topics that we talked about were growing up, retirement, increased use of technology, and discipline in schools.
All right. We're on to the next question.
Alrighty. In your conversations with your dyad partners, what might have been eye-opening to you or got you thinking about something that you hadn't thought before?
Well, Sam, I know something that I really thought about was how different some people had it when they grew up versus how I grew up. So it was really just interesting to see how somebody who even lives, because me and my dad partner live pretty much in the same community, can have such a different experience, 40 years between being born. So it really shows that even in the community and over a period of time, your experience can be completely different from somebody you live down the road from.
Uh, my dyad partner had a lot more outdoorsy upbringing than I did, and we compared how he spent a lot of summers outdoors and in the woods and having adventures, and I didn't. But it led to some interesting discussions about dangerous experiences and reliance on your parents and what time you should be going home.
Mm,
Things change over generations in that sense.
interesting. You'll hear more about that, I'm sure.
I kind of had a similar eye-opening experience that I did with Gabe. More so about the fact that my dyad partner is a librarian, and my path was to become a teacher. Um, no, again, our topic was book banning and challenging, and just the realization that, librarians and school teachers have two different jobs, but because of book banning and challenging, we can kind of come together and just brainstorm ideas and just get to talking and figure out ways to solve an issue or to just, I don't know, I guess vent about a situation or to just um, get the ball moving on something. It's just really powerful because if not for this experience, I just it never would have dawned on me.
Mm, mhm, mhm, mhm.
Something that was eye-opening in my discussion was we talked a lot about retirement because obviously that's something that I'm not really thinking about right now. So I learned that there are 4 different stages of retirement. The first stage is the vacation phase, which is during the first year of retirement, which involves having a sense of freedom because you no longer have to work and are able to take vacations at your own time. The second stage is the loss stage, which is 1 to 2 years in because you start to get bored and experience a loss of routine and lose friends that you worked with. The third stage is trial and error, where people find out different activities and try different activities to get rid of their boredom and try to find things that they enjoy doing. And the final and most gratifying stage is the rewiring, also called reinventing stage, because people re-engage in the world by finding a new purpose, such as volunteering or community service.
Interesting. Interesting. All right. Does anybody have anything they want to add or share from the eye-opening elements of your conversation?
From Lindsay, I do think that's very interesting. It's something that, I mean, most of us have not thought about much is what life is going to be like when we lose that routine of school and lose that routine of work and go into the retirement 4 stages. Like you said, how you start off really enjoying this freedom, but then you end up having to completely change how you were living your life because now you can pretty much do whatever you want. So you have to kind of rewire those habits into your system. That was definitely something that I hadn't thought about before you brought that up, Lindsay.
Yeah. I hear a lot of more doctor's appointments are in the mix too. Because it's get older there. Does anybody have anything else to add for number two? Question two? All right. It's on to Alice for question three.
Sure. Um, did you have any fears that you had to manage or overcome as your conversations unfolded?
So definitely, Alice, along with that, the biggest fear that I had was the fear of alienating my dyad partner, right? We all want to be, especially when it's that kind of in an intimate environment where you're one-on-one with somebody, you don't really want to say the wrong thing and, alienate them and make them think that, wow, we're not as similar as we thought. But you also want to, get into that area where you can really have a conversation where you find out new things and you explore new horizons while having that comfortability. So that was one of the fears that, of course, I had to manage through this conversation and really push through it and understand that even if we don't get along on one perspective, it's not going to destroy a relationship for sure.
Good point.
That was very interesting, Gabriel. Uh, were there any particular instances that you felt like you might have strayed into the alienation category a little bit?
I suppose some areas where that, so in our conversation about the shift in culture, of course, one of the big things driving that is more of a loss, and we struggle to find a higher belief or a higher order. So, kind of along the lines of understanding where my partner is going with his religion and things like that, and that kind of area, right? That's one of our stress points in America today. Is there's a lot of tension between religion and no religion and things like that, and where to find that balance between talking about it and trying to not come off as too far to one side or the other.
That that reminds me of the challenge I had with my partner, where uh, I'm I'm friends with my dyad partner. We're very familiar with each other, so we've kind of settled into we know how to communicate with each other and how not to push each other's buttons in pleasant conversation. So we might have been a little too overcautious and not wanting to
Mm,
disturb our
explore.
relationship. I think even subconsciously,
Yeah.
uh, it doesn't really. I don't know what that would categorize as one of the F's, but maybe we were fawning over each other a little bit.
Who would like to go next on question 3? Lindsay or Alyssa?
I can. So, unlike Eric, I hadn't met my partner before, so I was nervous about this process at first, but as the conversations went on, I started to feel more comfortable.
Was there anything you did to sort of manage your nerves there?
I just practiced like writing down things to say that I was planning to say ahead of time so I can get them across more clearly.
Cool.
I will say for me, um, last time I went through this process, I was partnered with a male, and that made me nervous. Mainly also because it was a stranger. I had never met the person before. But this time, I was still nervous because it's still a stranger, but I was partnered um, with a woman. Um, so I wasn't as nervous this time. Um, but I think a lot of my nervousness really stemmed from the fact that she is a really intelligent person, and I don't know, people that are really intelligent and are really good with their words and just know what they're talking about, like there's just that presence with them that just like makes me feel nervous, and that was such a hard barrier to cross. But once I crossed it, it was smooth sailing from there. And it was just like, I don't know. I just used like grounding methods, like planting my feet on the floor and just like trying to control my breathing and stuff, and just listen to her talk, and eventually it just went away. So, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Mhm.
When I started in psychiatry, we were warned about that there would be a group of people who would use intellectual defenses and be very articulate about what they believed to be true. And it was no different from what the less articulate people believed, but they just said it better, and it would be intimidating.
Yeah.
That's something that when I did the dyad a couple years ago, how Gabriel mentioned he didn't want to alienate his partner. I didn't want to alienate myself. I didn't want my partner to think that I either didn't know what I was talking about or that I was just trying to find a topic just to get a conversation going, like an assignment. And once I kind of realized that as much as for if it's an older person, as much as I want to hear their stories and live their past, they want to hear my stories that are also like my past, but kind of their future. So then when you kind of think of it more of a storytelling guideline and realize that you're going to learn something new, so you don't have to be so afraid of if you don't know or if you don't think you're smart enough. Everyone's going to learn something new about each other, and that's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think sometimes we forget when we're in conversation that we are actually telling stories, whether it's the story about how your day went or, what you picked up at the grocery store, or whether you're telling a story about how you feel and what you think about, XYZ issue. It comes down to the art of storytelling. And if you can relax into that as a sharing process, it really does help you gain a sense of confidence. You may not be a strong confidence depending on the topic, but at least it gets you kind of thinking I'm telling a story, and it doesn't have to be about, me showing off expertise per se, right? That kind of thing. Does anybody have any other thoughts on this one? And if not, then Matt's up with the next question.
All right. Even if you mostly agreed about the topics that you discussed, were there any generational or other differences that you noticed between your partner and you? And if so, how did they shape the conversation?
So what I noticed most, like I mentioned when I was explaining about my partner, is that over that 42-year age gap, there's of course some cultural differences that we see, versus today versus in the past. So some things that were different for my dyad partner growing up was his alcoholic father, things like that were more normalized back then. It really wasn't something people talked about until things come out more today and we understand, wow, we look back at it and we think about, wow, that was a rough time, but back then it was just the norm. Other things were like the military in our small area was like one of the only ways to get out and explore the world and see new things, and that was a very normal thing to do back then. And it's even still now today, but it was one of the only ways to go and leave the area, something like that.
Mhm.
With the topic of books that me and my dyad partner talked about, she mentioned that what really drives her opinion forward with the book banning and challenging is that she had a not so much sheltered childhood, but her parents were really religious, so she didn't really have access to the books that she would have wanted to read um, while she was in high school, just exploring who she was and what she wanted to learn about. Whereas um, when I was growing up, my parents were pretty religious, but they weren't, um, they understood that I was a kid and that I needed to be able to um, discover things and figure out things, to a point, um, and figure things out for myself. So they didn't necessarily carry throughout the entire conversation, but that was one difference that I noticed in our conversation. That was like, uh, very, very interesting because, I mean, while we both have the same outlook on book banning and challenging, we both come from a very different place.
It was almost like your paths to getting there were two very different.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I guess I have a
I
question. So was your book banning topic on like actual banned books or just books that were kind of banned by your parents and what you weren't able to read growing up?
We kind of touched on a little bit of all of that. I mean, we touched on just the idea of book banning and challenging. We touched on um, you know, books that were banned in her house, books that um, have been banned in other states books that are like personally like we could understand that are no's for us. Like we covered it all.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Alyssa, did you guys talk about how it's really shifted the knowledge gap with the internet? How 50 years ago, when a book was banned, it would be a lot harder to find out that information a different way. Whereas today, even if the book is banned in one state, you might not be able to get it physically, but you could most certainly get it digitally online through certain means like that. Did that come up at all in your conversation?
Yeah, it certainly did.
Mm.
Yep. Yep.
Hmm.
My partner and I discussed the differences, or what we talked about beyond generational differences. We talked about cultural differences. My partner's parents are born and raised in the U.S., and so is my partner. My parents are immigrants from the Middle East. So things that talking about certain similarities, which might have been surprising, like our parents were both sort of antisocial in the same way, but some other things were different. Um, his parents were a lot more familiar with pop culture compared to mine. Like talking about banning books. My parents have no clue about what the content of any books were that I was reading growing up. Whereas his parent, he talked about Dungeons and Dragons, which when he was younger, there was kind of a panic about in the news. But there was no such restrictions in my house growing up.
Mm-hmm. I remember some of that. I think I'm around the same age as your partner, and I remember a lot of what you're talking about there. Yeah. Hmm. Any other thoughts?
My partner and I also talked about our differences growing up. Since they lived on a farm, we talked about how chores look different, such as using dishwashers now compared to having to wash dishes by hand, and how kids used to play outside a lot more than they do now due to the increased use of technology. Most kids are inside watching TV or playing video games.
Mm-hmm. Was that something that you related to? What he said about the generational difference with games, or like in yourself? Did you see that maybe you weren't as outside as your partner
Yeah.
indicated? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. All right. Does anybody have anything else on this question? Or other thoughts or questions for each other? All right. We're going on to the next question. See?
Were there times that you leaned into your curiosity in order to understand your dyad partner's perspective better?
I think that during most conversations, we have to be open to curiosity, right? Especially in this kind of environment where we want to understand the generational difference. We have to be curious of something that we don't understand and maybe question things more than we regularly would talking to somebody who's in our own generation because things were just so much different. So if they make a reference that you don't understand, it'd be very advantageous for both of you to understand their perspective and be curious and understand where they're coming from. So I think a lot of good conversation is predicated on being very curious.
Mhm. Did you find anything in your conversation with your partner that you felt like, oh, wow, I need to ask some questions about that?
I found a lot in, like I mentioned earlier, with his religion and how he transformed from his younger age, where he started out just being more or less raised that way, but not 100% committed to where he is today. And now he's very committed to his faith and reads scripture every day. So I think that was a great area to dive deeper into it and understand how his journey has changed throughout his life and what led him to where he is today.
Mhm.
Samantha, would you mind repeating the question, please?
No, I don't mind. Were there times that you leaned into your curiosity in order to understand your dyad partner's perspective better?
Yeah, I think so. I think some of my dyad partner's experiences, the closest closest experience I would have to relate to would be from reading books. He would do dangerous things out in the woods that involving explosives and guns and motorized vehicles and whatnot. And I really had to try and put myself in his shoes really severely to try and understand that. But comparing myself, who's never been seriously injured or broken a bone, to his experience, I just it was tough.
For me, it was when she mentioned that she sat on a school board and offered her perspective on book banning and challenging as it relates to that side of things. Because, I mean, it does oftentimes reach the school board level, as you would probably imagine. So it was just interesting hearing her side of that. That's a side that I've never heard. I've done my own research on book banning and challenging for other classes and stuff that I've had. So it was nice to hear a fresh perspective.
And especially somebody who's a professional, working directly with that topic in their day-to-day life.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with her being a librarian too. It was it was really nice getting to listen to just what she has to deal with. Just uh, a parent coming in to the library and they got like a middle school kid with them and just asking for a recommendation on a book and having to be careful about the book that they're recommending because they don't want to be, you know, berated by the parent. You never know who you have standing in front of you. No.
Alyssa, can I ask, were there any examples that your dyad partner fully supported the banning of the book? Like somebody brought up a book as a challenge and your partner found, whoa, yeah, we should get rid of this one.
Um, I can't think of any in particular. I know right at the beginning, um, I mentioned, and this is going to sound so crazy, but for historical purposes, I would not mind reading Mein Kampf, only because I find it super important to get into Hitler's mind and figure out what the heck happened, what led to all this destruction. Her personally, she wouldn't want to touch that book. She didn't give a reason. That's just not a book that she'd want to touch. So I think that's like the only book she mentioned that like no, no, no. I don't want to touch that. But nothing else. She not To Kill a Mockingbird, not The Outsiders, none of that. Just Mein Kampf.
I've read Mein Kampf. It's very interesting, and I'm Jewish.
Yeah, that one's a yeah. I've gotten some looks, but oh well.
Well, as a historian, and Matt also has a history degree. I mean, it's a primary source, right? It's how we understand the past. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And what's that quote from Santayana?
It's not a book to bring on public transportation, probably.
Probably not.
Probably.
Yeah.
Lindsay, did you have anything to add?
Something I was curious about was when we were talking about discipline in schools and the evolution of the dunce cap. I had heard of people having to wear the dunce cap at school, but I also learned that if someone from church heard that you were doing something bad during the week, then you would have to sit at the front of the church and by the entrance with the dunce cap.
Mm,
I hadn't heard of that before, so that was interesting.
yeah. I remember one instance of a dunce cap in my childhood. Other than that, it was not me personally, but I remember some kid, and I don't think it was something that was like in my classroom, but something I walked past, like you see in another classroom or something like that. But I do remember students being put on like chairs and had to sit facing a corner. And that was pretty common in my era. Alice, do you remember dunce caps?
No, the nuns didn't use dunce caps, but they did give everyone a ranking.
Mm.
Work hard, you knew where you stood in the class. If you were the top of the class or the bottom of the class or in the 75th percentile or the 25th percentile. And that was that made people feel, smart or stupid relative to their peers.
Yeah, the posting of our grades publicly kind of stuff. Yeah, yeah, we had some of that. Can't do that anymore. Can't do that anymore for good reason, right? All righty. I think we're on to the next question, unless anybody has anything to add. All right. I think it's Matt.
Indeed. So what did your partners seem to appreciate about the dyad experience?
Some areas that my partner liked talking about were sharing his experiences and bringing him forward to like the next generation, right? So it gives a lot of perspective for people to understand how things are different today. Because without that perspective, without seeing what it was, you can't really tell how things have changed, how they've maybe improved or worsened, depending on your perspective of the past or now, right? So without that, there would be no way to do that. So I think that's one thing that my partner really appreciated is that it was a open platform to have a conversation with somebody who's much younger and somebody who is willing to listen and understand what it was like back then, and a great way to share that perspective when really we're losing a lot of these natural conversations and it's not really happening normally in our day-to-day lives anymore, especially with that great generational gap. Even within our families, it's becoming harder and more strained to have those conversations. So I think it was a really great platform, definitely for my dyad partner who was happy about that, and then for myself who was very thankful for the opportunity to do it.
My partner also enjoyed the intergenerational dialogue aspect and thought that it was important for people to talk face to face more compared to texting and digital communication.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think my diet partner, or my friend, appreciated the opportunity to just talk at length about topics without risk of things devolving into joking or whatnot. Just focusing on being able to tell his story. I think was kind of a novelty for him.
Yeah, a lot of people don't have the experience of people deeply listening, right?
I
Yeah.
think what my partner enjoyed the most was just getting the chance to get to talk about something that she's really passionate about, especially with someone like-minded and in a similar field that she's in, um, and someone who's young and has a fresh mind coming into things. I think she really appreciated that.
Cool. Good to know. It's cool. Well, we are at our last question for the evening and or for the recording, I should say. And this focuses a little bit more on the skill sets that were developed through the training process as well as the practice and work you did with your dyad partners. So, based on your major or your career interests, in what ways, if any, do you see the content and skills learned through this semester's training as being beneficial to your futures?
I'll start off. So for mine, I'm in business administration and a focus in management. But I think the training that we've gone through is really applicable to any career path. It really shows that it's really given us opportunity to understand how powerful communication and language can be. And when used properly, I think like we discussed earlier, and what Alice mentioned about how you have to watch out for people who are intellectual and, have a better way of explaining their argument. It's that kind of thing where the more command you have over language, the better off your life will be because you're able to get through more complex situations in pretty much any career. So I just think that the course has really shown us how to slow down and listen to somebody and think through problems and then clearly articulate our solutions to the world.
I think that no matter what fields we end up in, no matter what we end up doing, I think that just learning how to communicate with each other without um having, there's a word for it, it escapes me, but like premeditated like thoughts about somebody else. Again, there's a word for that. I can't think of what it is. Um or just arguing and just not being able to get along is of the utmost importance, especially right now, seeing as we're so divided. And we, especially with technology and the internet, it's we're struggling to talk with each other right now. So just having the skill to have a face-to-face conversation with somebody, how to navigate fight, freeze, and fawn is important. How to, um, you know, deal with a situation where somebody in front of you is being combative and just knowing how to walk away or how to bring them back down if you know how to do that, or whatever it may be. It's just of the utmost importance. How to talk to a parent if you're becoming a teacher, how to um, move through a business negotiation. It's it's so important, so important. And I think that this micro credential really does a good job of teaching you all that and paving the way for you to understand that and to be able to navigate that through wherever life takes you.
I think uh, as in any career path, whatever you go into, you're going to be having to deal with people who have been there before you, who are typically of an older generation or whichever generation it is, but they're going to have differences from you in how they understand the world and relate to other people. So understanding how people of different generations see and understand things and learning how to communicate with them, there isn't any situation where it doesn't come in handy, really, just in the professional realm.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, combination of things. And of course, we want to hear from Lindsay too. But the thought that occurs at the moment is, that's one of the things about the particular training we do is that we have that benefit of combining the psychoanalytical elements from Dr. Mayer's expertise, and then that historic memory dialogue, which, anchors you into a style of questioning and curiosity that is, generationally, gets those generational differences highlighted. Yeah. Lindsay, did you have anything on that?
I agree with what Alyssa said about that it's important to learn how to disagree with someone appropriately, because no matter what career you're in, if you're a teacher, you're going to have to deal with parents that might not agree with everything you're doing, or business partners that might not agree with something. And it's just, there's always going to be a time when you're going to come across someone that doesn't disagree, that disagrees, and you have to just learn how to professionally deal with that without making the situation worse.
And I think what I hear from a number of you is sort of almost like too, you have to not only the conversational skills, but that conversational skills can be a way to help de-escalate tensions as they're occurring in the moment, right? And sometimes just deeper listening and curiosity can really diffuse a lot of that, yeah.
Absolutely. If you have an instinct for who the person is and where they're coming from, it's much easier to take their challenge in context and respond to where they're coming from rather than where you think they're coming from or where you defensively want to react from. If they're 40 years older than you think about the fact that their perspective is coming from the way they were raised rather than where you live right now. And just bridging those divides can go a long way toward developing a better relationship with your boss or your coworkers or anyone else that you come in contact with.
Does anybody have any extra thoughts before I close out our time together? All right. Well, thank you so much for a wonderful discussion. It was really fascinating to hear the experiences you had with your dyad partners and your insights you have, excuse me, gleaned through this. For our audience, each winter semester, as indicated earlier, the students of the Civics Corps dive into a series of hands-on activities and materials that train them in civic diplomacy skills. As a 2026 study from the Constructive Dialogue Institute indicates, these types of skills are actually in high demand right now from employers who want to see, quote, active listening, perspective taking, emotional self-regulation, and interpersonal curiosity, along with teamwork and collaboration skills in their employees. Using an intergenerational approach, the Civics Corps students explore these key concepts and practice the dialogue strategies through an interdisciplinary lens that I mentioned a little bit ago, which is the psychological strategies, psychoanalytical strategies combined with historic memory methods. This helps them gain a deeper and scientifically grounded understanding of how to work collaboratively, connect meaningfully across differences. To capstone their journey, they did the podcast that you just watched. And we want to offer some thank yous for the work that the Civics Corps does and the support that we get. First of all, a huge thank you goes out to my wonderful colleagues and friends, Dr. Alice Mayer and Mr. Matt Bagatti from Waging Dialogue. Their dedication, wisdom, and care in this collective effort is deeply appreciated. We are also grateful for the support of Bay College, under the leadership of Dr. Narita Hughes, as well as the members of CCAB, the Civics Corps Advisory Board, that helps us kind of think through the things we do from time to time with our students and this program. Important shout outs must also go out to Mrs. Samantha Birch, our Waging Dialogue intern, who has been of invaluable support, especially to me, but to all of us as we work this semester. And we also thank Mrs. Heather Kreidler, who volunteers generously of her time by assisting both with the Civics Corps and Waging Dialogue. We also offer special thanks to the community members who gave their time to engage with our students across generations. The work of the Civics Corps is part of a larger effort in our country's history known as the United States Civic Wellness Movement, which is widespread and an organic rise of everyday Americans who have had enough of the combative and toxic polarization as seen on TV, in the halls of governance, and of course on social media. Such efforts serve as a counterforce to the fear-driven and divisive forces that threaten the maintenance of our republic's constitutionally grounded domestic tranquility and general welfare as fundamental blessings of liberty. Thanks again for joining us. If you would like to learn more about civic diplomacy skills and how you can apply them in your everyday life, please visit Waging Dialogue's website for more information on and some upcoming training opportunities. And to close, may the dialogues of our time help forge a more perfect union, one that is functional, healthy, and hope-filled for ourselves and future generations. Thank you.